Well, welcome back to a continuation of episode 4, part dos, in this sense. But if you don't speak Spanish, that means 2, if you couldn't tell by my fingers. But
I thought you were holding up 4.
yes, 4.
Dos.
Dos. No, so just kind of getting into things. This week has been different for me in my schooling. Going in and teaching. I mean, now at this point in my student teaching, this is week 4. Yeah, this is week 4. And I'm already taking over half of the class. Or not half of the class, but half of the day. I'm teaching first, second, and third grade. The more I kind of do general music, the more I notice that it's really not my thing. But it doesn't subtract from the fact that I get to teach kids every day.
Music's your thing.
Right, general music is not my thing.
Teaching of it is.
No, I like the teaching aspect of it. Just the general.
Make sure I didn't misunderstand you there. I'm like, hold on a minute. You are going to school to teach kids music, and I think you just said general music is not my thing.
No, the aspect of general music. So not like band or choir, but general music.
Like the general.
Right, the aspect, the theory, and all that.
General.com. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. So.
So you've been diving more into your classes, and I mean, you're almost done.
Right, with this first 6-week period. Yeah.
Like you've got one more to go after this, and then you're pretty much graduated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, you're pretty close. I mean, isn't it this year?
Yeah.
Yeah. So later this year you graduate.
I graduate in May.
Oh, there you go.
So
after this 6 weeks period, then what?
After the 6-week period, then I have a 10-week at another school with a junior senior high, which will ultimately allow me to finish up my student teaching, get my key assessments done, making sure that I've completed everything to the accredited college, and sign up for an application for a license, get a license, and get a job.
Hopefully get right into a place.
Right
away.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah. See, I mean, I wasn't necessarily student teaching, but like when I was going through my training for EMT and fire and then finally paramedic, like it was applying for any jobs right away as soon as I was in class.
Oh, absolutely.
Because like I'm already out of like high school and I wanted to get the real-time experience while also being in class. And so, the unique thing is when you're in class, you just get your experience by doing some like ride-alongs, but being on a department that'll allow you to come in to work while also getting ride-alongs, like you're just getting a double, kind of like a good double whammy worth of experience. Like, you get to know the job, you get to know the differences between what you're learning in class,
the ins and the outs. It's
what you're doing out in the field.
It's the scenario versus the real life.
And
absolutely,
I think last time, between our last episode and this, our episode tonight, I started doing a instructor course at work. And so I'm kind of in a similar boat as you are now. Like, you've been going to college specifically for teaching. With me, it's a instructor course that will encompass both fire and EMS. And so once it's done and I have to take the state test, I have to pass, the test, do all that stuff. Once I get that done, then I've got my instructor certification.
Right. You just don't have to jump through the same amount of hoops that I do.
Not necessarily. No, I don't have to go to a 4-year college for that. It's more or less like a month worth of this class. And
which is nice.
Maybe a month and a half more like, but whatever. It's still a lot smaller. So I noticed you had sent me a text earlier today about your lecture that you were going through.
Right.
And it had to do with if I remember right, it had to do with like certain learning styles.
Oh, absolutely.
Of kids and everything.
Yeah, we were talking about certain learning styles and how, not every kid learns the same way. Every kid is different. And it's good to make sure that what you're teaching the students are actually following along,
Right.
and you do what we call formative assessments, which is just a fancy word for saying
You're doing fine.
it's a formative assessment is not really what kids would or you guys would think as a test. It's more of a formative assessment can be this. Do you believe in the Bible? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. There's my formative
Oh,
assessment.
good.
So
Yeah.
when we were in school, our band director would do that all the time,
Hmm.
because that's kind of how he gauged on whether or not we understood what he was teaching to us.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that because,
I didn't realize how much I was learning about music actually in school, because to me, it's just you show up and you get to play.
mm-hmm,
And then, I mean, obviously, at the very start, you've got to learn how to play your instrument, how to read music, how to read rhythm, do all those things. But then, like, obviously, as we progress through school, we're learning more things about music,
right?
but you just don't realize it because
You
you're not,
don't because
you,
you're immersed in it,
yeah, your brain, at least from a student perspective, you're not even near the same realm that the teacher's in,
mm-hmm.
because like in your case, you've had to learn so much about, theory and all these extra things that, like,
Tendencies of certain pitches on different
yeah, I mean,
instruments really delve deep,
the students won't know those things,
right?
but as you teach them, and the more and more you go through your teaching, as you gain more experience in your career, you're just going to find the unique ways to be able to teach all the students as a whole, and you're not going to feel that challenge to have to reach one, two, three specific individuals, because everybody's now getting it.
Right,
Like right at the very start, you said, okay, yeah, this general thing is not really my bag right now.
right.
But at the same time, this is what's getting you started
Mm-hmm.
for teaching. And the same thing, like for me, is like, this is why I felt like I was in the same boat in a sense as you, is because now I'm learning more about the instructor realm, and what it is to form a classroom and to teach that class, and to essentially gauge and evaluate and do all of those things to be able to ensure that you are creating competent providers out there,
Just competent people in
just
general.
competent people.
I mean, the one thing
So,
I was teaching today, I was teaching third graders recorder.
oh, nice.
Yeah, so we're talking for you old folks out there, flutophones.
Oh, yeah.
But
Mary
I
had a
was
little lamb,
nah, we're not even there yet.
hot cross
We're not
buns,
even there yet. But
just
it'll come.
how to make a note come out.
It really is.
Yeah,
Today we talked about just kind of a review of um, when you play the recorder. A lot of the problems that these students have is blowing too hard
sure.
because the recorder doesn't need a whole bunch of air. It's a whistle.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a
It's just
whistle
a
with
big old
keys.
plastic whistle.
So when you'll find them, they're going really blowing hard, and they don't need to blow that hard. Really, it's like if you have a candle right here and you're blowing and you try to just make the candlelight flicker. That's exactly what you're looking for. That's a way that I described it today, and that at least got half of the class to understand, oh, that's how I should use my air. Another, when I saw that it didn't click with the rest of the class, I used a yawn. I mean, think about a yawn. When you yawn, you're not using a whole bunch of air all at once, but it's light, almost fluffy air. And it's a perfect breath support for when you're playing recorder so that the teacher's ears are still alive after the class. So, I mean, today we just talked about holding our recorder with our right hand and with our left hand, because left hand always goes on top, putting your thumb over top of that back hole in the back. And then
Did you see that?
I did see that.
What was that?
My computer did something interesting.
You
It,
made
w-
a hand gesture,
it
and
was
there
a
was
it was
fireworks
a
across
thumbs
the
up because
stream.
I'm over here using a
Look, it's
it's yeah,
so
it's
for you guys might not even see this on the recording, but his computer is basically emoting what gestures he's doing with his hands. So I think when he threw both hands up, it made the fireworks, and he gave the thumbs up, and it gave a thumbs up on the screen. Anyway,
those of you who are Mac users, you'll know that
you may not
this
even
right
see it.
here gives you fireworks in the background,
That's
and
wild. I
um
never knew that. I don't even know if my Mac does that.
I'm pretty sure it does.
I mean, it could, but yours is like a Mac Pro, and I don't even know what it's in a different style than that,
It's
but
an Air probably.
I think it is.
But like if you go and you do the hearts, let's see if it works. Yeah, see, it'll put hearts outside of the hearts in your hand, and I know you're not gonna probably see that, and it
Maybe
probably
it
looks
will. I don't know.
if you do, then that's great, but if not,
You
we
just
look
get
like a
to
bunch
we
of stupid
you
people
get
right
to
now.
see us making hand gestures that will not even come through the video. But anyway, so all this to say, at least with what's recently been happening, we are learning more about what it is to be instructors and teachers.
Well, I
And
think one of the most important things I'm gonna cut you off, and I always tend to do
you always
that,
do
don't
that.
I?
That's okay.
But it'll be quick, I promise. It won't
Yeah.
be something very long. Um, but one of the things I noticed as you're learning and as a teacher is a teacher never stops learning. A teacher will always learn from the mistakes they make as well as research that they do and working with the students because the students will teach you something you never thought of or give you a way that your brain would never ever think. But their brain worked that way. So if you can use the way that they're talking about, you can reach more students that way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, to try to make a good segue around this whole thing, um, we're both kind of in that boat of just trying to basically be better instructors, teachers, using what we know that we can do to provide for other people.
mhm.
And, you know, that's why we kind of got into this whole podcast thing because
Absolutely.
we want to read the word with you guys. We want to help you guys and gals understand more about the Bible just as much as we're learning more about the Bible. So to jump back a little bit to part one, we kind of ended it on a little bit of a cliffhanger, if you will. It was more about the census that was being taken, basically right before Jesus was born. Um, and so we're just going to pick back up on that. And so we're right now we're in Luke 2, and I'm just going to read the first three verses.
And this is kind of where we left off in the
Yeah,
last
so
section
we're gonna
was
do a
in
little bit of like a recap, but it's
yep.
here it is. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. So just to stop there, last last episode we kind of hit a little bit on the fact of, um, as this was the first census that was taking place, why would that have been needed?
Mhm.
And if that wasn't done beforehand, what was the change? What brought this on? And so, essentially, with what brought the census on is that Caesar heard about this coming Messiah and that it was going to be,
Well, not Caesar, but King Herod, remember?
sorry, not Caesar, King Herod. I just read Caesar, so it was in my mind.
Right.
So King Herod heard about the census. Wow, I am
King
mincing
Herod heard about
mincing
Jesus.
words.
Caesar
Yeah.
wanted the census, but King Herod heard about the king to be.
Yes.
And that's what frustrated
So
him.
he frustrated because he's like, well, I'm the king.
Mhm.
Nobody else is king, right? So they basically wanted the census to try to narrow down where to find this person, this new king, this new Messiah that was to come.
Mhm.
And
So if we continue reading in chapter 2.
yeah, so you want me to just go back to 4 then, or do you want me to go down a little bit more?
Go ahead and start 4.
Yeah, so chapter 2, verse 4. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. Continuing on. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. Think about that.
Mhm.
You think of glory, and you're thinking this great,
Big,
beautiful, big display
massive. Yeah.
that really would draw your attention, and you would be more or less so immersed in it that you're in awe.
And you're not paying attention to what's going on
Right.
around you.
But this was so sudden for these shepherds. I mean, your average shepherd in that area, they're all hours of the day and night watching over their flock because that's what they do. And then, boom, this huge light just shows up in the sky.
Well, and I mean,
Um,
imagine this too. You're a shepherd. I mean, in that time, shepherds were viewed as like they considered themselves to be lowly people, but
More or less a humble
right,
people.
humble. And but you kind of go further into it, and like further on in Jesus's life, he talks a lot about the shepherd as the sheep, or
Yeah,
in the
the
sheep, and
the idea of being a shepherd,
right.
and
So,
how we as sheep need the shepherd, and the
and
Lord being our shepherd.
right, and this is our first connection to the shepherds.
Yeah, just right there once he was born. So let me continue on. Um, but the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth, peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby, who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told to them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which they which were just as they had been told. On the 8th day, when it was time to circumcise the child, he was named Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he was conceived.
For those of you who don't understand the significance of circumcision, it's kind of a weird thing to talk about, but it is mentioned throughout the Bible a lot. But the idea of circumcision goes clear back to Abraham, and it's a sign of between the Jewish people and their God, showing that these people have come from God, creating that relationship, which is, it started back in the garden in Genesis, but this is even more. This is where Abraham has split apart from the rest and no longer believes in five, six, seven, maybe eight gods, but in one. So this is the first time monotheism has ever started.
Mm.
So this is where the idea of circumcision comes from, is the covenant between God and his people.
And, as it says in this up until verse 21 in chapter 2, it had said that the angel had the he was named Jesus, the name the angel had given him before he was conceived.
Right.
And so obviously that will go back earlier in Luke 1, when the birth of Jesus was foretold. And that was when the angel showed up to Mary and basically said, again, the idea of "do not be afraid." So, because
Isn't that such an easy thing to
wouldn't
say?
you? I mean, if you're walking along or if you're going about your daily business and then like boom, this glorifying angel appears in front of you, and like what are you going to do? Like
Hmm.
you're not understanding what's going on, so naturally your natural instinct is to be afraid. And every time that the angels show up, and even when the Lord shows up, they're always comforting and saying, "Do not be afraid."
Right.
And so, the angel shows up to Mary. He says, "Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God." you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. And this is obviously a great time of confusion for Mary because Mary was a virgin. And
What a hard thing to hear, knowing that you've, at least in our culture, in our day, the idea of a virgin.
well, it's physically impossible
Well,
in
right.
our current.
It was physically impossible then but like in our culture,
Well, yeah.
it's not something that you hear very often of a woman being a
And does it
virgin.
even say how old Mary was?
I don't think it
I don't
does.
know if it even gives an age to
But like
Mary.
if we go back to the idea of John the Baptist, which was the person who made the way or pointed the way for Jesus, um, the mother of John the Baptist was what is her name?
Elizabeth,
Oh yeah, Elizabeth. She was old.
mostly because I'm looking right at
I'm glad you're looking right at it.
it.
And it's right in front of me too. I should look at what's in front of me.
Well, and actually, it doesn't even say an age for Elizabeth. It just says that her and her husband Zechariah they were childless,
Mhm.
because they were both, quote, very old. So
Right.
it doesn't give you an age, but it's neither here nor there, because it doesn't really matter.
It really doesn't.
Obviously, John the Baptist was born from Elizabeth, and then right after John the Baptist was born, Jesus was born,
Mhm.
and so
But let's go back to what you were talking about, the birth of Jesus foretold.
yeah.
And it
So that
starts
was
at verse
chapter 1.
26 in chapter 1.
Yeah, and that's the whole passage of the birth of Jesus. But um, I just wanted to quickly summarize that. And
Yeah,
so, Mary, the angel's name was Gabriel,
correct.
and Mary was, let's see, where was she at? Because they weren't in Bethlehem at that time.
Mm,
They were, if it even says, but that's okay.
It says Nazareth.
Oh yeah, yeah. So they
God
were
sent an Abel to
they were in Nazareth.
Nazareth, a town in Galilee. Yeah. So they were not really at home, but they were at home.
Yeah, essentially they were close.
Right.
So they were there, and that's when Mary, she had had a dream, and the angel had came to her in the dream and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." This bothered Mary because
Did Mary have a dream or did the angel just come to her?
no, the angel went to her. Oh,
It just said went to her.
never mind. It wasn't a dream. Joseph had the dream.
I'm pretty sure it was
Why am
Joseph
I
who had the
mixing
dream.
these things up?
That's all right.
It's easy to mix them up, I guess.
It is.
So angel came to her first and said, "Greetings, you are highly favored. The Lord is with you." And then she just kind of ponders these things. She was troubled, and then the angel basically reassured her again, "Do not be afraid,
Right.
Mary. You have found favor with God." That's when he says, "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call Jesus." Again, she's more confused again, little bit further down the passage. "How will this
Yeah.
be?"
Verse 34.
Mary asked the angel, "since I am a virgin." The angel answered, the Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old
There it
age.
is again. In her old age.
And she, who was said to be unable to conceive, is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail.
This
"I am the Lord's servant," Mary answered. "May your word to me be fulfilled." Then the angel left her.
Holy crap. To have an angel come to you and say, "Hey, by the way, you're going to be the carrier of the
And she
Son of
says,
God."
"I'm the servant." I mean, she doesn't throw her hands up like, "Oh, well."
Ah,
Oh, maybe there's fireworks again on the screen.
maybe. I don't know. But no, to humble yourself to that point where you're like, "Yes, I am a servant of God and that this is what God wills and I am a part of it. Let it be."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, could you imagine?
We can't even say that confidently in our own lives today.
Well, I mean, especially because we're male.
Well, I'm not
I
saying I'm
know.
not saying
I
it
know.
in the
I'm
fact.
just
I'm saying it as like, okay, if an angel were to come to you and I, or you or I tomorrow and say, "Hey, by the way, um, you are going to travel to this place and you're going to turn the whole entire country around, just you yourself, without any,
Mhm.
you're going to have things in your way, but you're not going to have any troubles.
Right.
And you're like, me? Well, how am I supposed to do that?
It's
No,
it's
instead,
exactly it's exactly what Peter says
yeah,
is, I'm not worthy."
yeah,
I'm not. Nothing that we ever do or nothing we can ever do makes us worthy.
yeah. And so, I mean, let's kind of finish this up real quick.
Mhm.
Not that we're trying to rush, but after Jesus is born, there's not really a whole lot that happens, especially after that fact. I mean, there is. Let's see. The
If you
next thing after Jesus is born, the next thing after is Jesus is presented in the temple.
Mhm.
So the purification rites, that is the circumcision, the purification rites required by the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it was written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord. So that's just fulfilling the purification rites,
Right.
getting through the circumcision. And then basically the next thing that we hear about Jesus is now when he's a boy and he's in the temple. And then from there, he's already preaching in the temple as a boy,
Right, which I think at some point
12 years old.
right, at some point I think we're gonna dive into that a lot, but let's continue with just simply Jesus coming down to earth.
Yeah.
Um, I can't remember, I'm pretty sure we did, but we talked about John 1, last time, and it said,
Yes, we did.
"In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning." Well, the Word being Jesus, and God being God. So, showing that Jesus has been there the whole time. Um, Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness not has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testifying concerning that the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. Um, John and Luke in their gospels are really good at the detail work. I don't know if you've ever dove deep into them, but Luke talks about Luke knows his audience, and in there he talks about um, when Jesus. And this is past a little bit, but when Jesus is crucified, saying that even the Roman centurion that was there when Jesus was crucified was talking about how this man was innocent. And for a Roman centurion to be working for Rome and living in Rome, that's a big thing to say because the final word comes from Rome.
Mhm.
So it takes the audience in. But
Pause.
so with the continuation of with God or the word being God, it shows that Jesus has been there the whole time, but if you go back far enough in the Old Testament, it talks about how Jesus will come from the line of David.
Mhm.
It's been promised to David.
Mhm.
Um, so if we go to Matthew, the book of Matthew, um, chapter 1, verses, I'm not going to read all this because it's the genealogy and names are hard to pronounce, but it's something that you should read and it's important. It might not seem important, but we're going to talk about it. Um, or chapter 1 verse 1 all the way through to um I'm going to stop at 17, but I think it'd be a good thing if we continued in after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to explain again, like Alden said, this true genealogy of Jesus. And so we'll start Matthew 1. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And as we already know, Abraham being the start, Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Um, as Alden said, go through, read these names. They are going to be hard to pronounce,
Yeah, cuz they're all
but
old names.
I can give it a shot if you want.
Sure,
So,
go for
okay.
it. So,
Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife, Solomon the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abijah, Abijah the father of Asa, Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram, Jehoram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah the father of Jotham, Jotham the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, familiar name, Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, or maybe it was Manasseh,
I would go with Manasseh, but
Manasseh the
you're doing
father
great. Don't stop.
of Amon, Amon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jeconiah, and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon.
Hmm.
After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Wow, that's a
Yeah,
hard one. Shealtiel, the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel, the father of Abihud. Abihud, the father of Eliakim. Eliakim, the father of Azor. Azor, the father of Zadok. Zadok, the father of Akim. Akim, the father of Elihud. Elihud, the father of Eleazar. Eleazar. Eleazar, the father of Mathan. Mathan, the father of Jacob. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. And Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. We have arrived, folks.
it's about
It's
time.
a painstaking process to have to feel like you have to pronounce these correctly, even though you're not, because in that time there were different inflections upon different letters that were in the names, so they were definitely pronounced differently than what I did. But we have
We
arrived.
have, and I don't know if I've ever showed you this before, but the sermon writing software that I use, Logos,
Yeah.
it will actually pronounce all those for
Oh
you.
boy, that's nice.
So
Maybe we should have done a brief listen to the names.
we should have, but you know, it's interesting and different to go through and actually try to read those. Because how many people now when they get to a word that's difficult go
There's a pause.
and then they continue reading
They
without trying the word.
slowly, they might try to slowly pronounce it, or they'll just pause and maybe they'll say that one, and then they'll go
Yeah,
on.
exactly.
I've done it.
Yep.
There's been names and I'm like, yeah, that guy, uh,
Yep. But
because I would butcher it
absolutely.
otherwise.
But
But
we've finally arrived.
yeah, so verse 17, after we've gone through the genealogy, it says,
Well, let me
thus,
read it because you read all the genealogy. You did the hard
I'm
stuff.
feeling selfish.
Let me take the cake.
Go ahead.
Thus there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah.
Now, I'm not too sure if there's any relevance to the numbers, because I know numbers tend to be
Hmm.
some relevance within the Bible, like the number 7 or the number 3, obviously being the Trinity. And
Right.
in this case, it was 14 in between the start to the exile, from the exile to um, the exile to the Messiah, from
Right.
the
So
exile
it
to the
was
Messiah.
14
Yeah.
from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah.
Right, right. So I don't know if there's a significance there, but if there is and somebody knows,
Put it
put
in
it
the
in the
comments.
comments. Let us know. We appreciate any feedback from anybody listening.
Absolutely. And I've been meaning to say this. But if you have anything that you want us to go over, put it in the comments as well. We will gladly go ahead and do
Yeah.
that.
And
Now,
here's the deal. If you guys ask us a question and maybe it takes us a little bit to get back to that, whether we address it in the next video, we will, in some way, shape, or form, we will try to address your question. So feel free, ask away. If we
absolutely.
don't know, we certainly will find out.
Hmm.
We will go to folks who we also think that they might know.
Right.
And if they don't know, then we have to do some studying first before we approach you with a solid answer,
Right, because the
as
last thing
far
we
as to
wanna
get you in the
do
right area.
right, because the last thing that we want to do, excuse me, is lead you in the wrong direction. Because the whole point of this podcast is lead you to the right direction.
Yeah, not guess.
Right. So
I guess we're going fine. I guess. I don't
right.
know.
So now we finally led up to the time of or the through the genealogy all the way to the Messiah known as Jesus the Christ.
Yep.
Um, but what I want to continue on here is continuing here in um, excuse me, big brain fart, and
Wow. You all right
I
there,
left a
pal?
little bit. I'm back on Earth, but I want to talk about and continue going on through this in Matthew because Matthew does a really good job of telling the beginning. He talks about the genealogy. I don't know if any of you know or have seen The Chosen, but Matthew is a tax collector. Being a tax collector, he's very good with numbers and very good with the history and writing things down in detail in The Chosen. So knowing that and knowing kind of the way that Matthew was, everything he has written down is really detailed and down to everything. If you want to know the Christmas story, which is what this is, you should start in Matthew um, chapter 1 and read all the way to 3.
Oh, I almost forgot that I skipped back over to Luke. So I was going to help you look, but then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in Luke.
Yeah. So, um, going on further here, it talks about we have already talked about how Mary had an angel come to her and say, "You will be the mother of the Christ." And in this sense, Joseph had an angel come to him after he had found that Mary was pregnant. And could you imagine being on that side? You wouldn't. This is the person you're supposed to marry and be with for the rest of your life, and next thing you know, she's been knocked up.
For lack of a better
For
term,
lack of
yeah.
a better term, but you think it's been done by someone else and that she's been unfaithful.
Yeah. And I mean, he was so far as to ready to publicly shame
Not
Mar-
publicly shame. It actually says in here that where does it say?
Oh.
So here it
Oh, he
says
wanted to avoid.
he wanted to avoid publicly shaming her. So here's what it said in 18 all the way through 19. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to the public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly.
Yeah. And that's when the angel came to Joseph in a dream.
Right. And this is where the angel
That's
comes in
where
the
I was
dream.
thinking of a dream because it was Joseph, not Mary.
So if we go down a little bit further, it says, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. I mean, that message is pretty straightforward and clear. But what faith Joseph had in accepting Mary as his wife. I mean, I was listening to the Unashamed podcast today, and I'm way back towards the beginning. And they were talking about this, and Jace Robertson said, if this was the case, that my girlfriend came to me and was pregnant, he said, I'd be gone. I ain't hanging around. I'm gone. But the fact that Joseph hung around and waited and stayed there with Mary and married her, that's kind of funny to say. But shows his willingness for God's plan.
Mhm.
So, um, there's a lot more here that we can go through, and I think
And I mean, it just kind of revolves around the same as what's in Luke. Obviously, the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, they all follow around, the birth of Jesus, Jesus's works as an adult, and basically fulfilling all the prophecies. And Alden had mentioned before that circumcision was a big deal regarding the law. And so I'm actually going to take that. I'm going to jump back to Luke. So we're still in Luke 2, at least where I'm at. So
okay.
if you're reading along, go to Luke 2 now. Um, and we're going to be at verse 22 when Jesus was presented in the temple. So the idea of taking him to the temple was to perform the purification rites, being the circumcision. So um,
And you're in Luke where?
Luke chapter 2,
Okay.
verse 22. So I'm going to read this. Again, verse 22. When the time came for the purification rites required by the law of Moses, Joseph and Mary took him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it was written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male is to be consecrated to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice in keeping with what it is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of doves or two young pigeons. Now there was a man in Jerusalem called Simeon, who was righteous and devout. He was waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not die before he had been the Lord's Messiah.
Scene.
Sorry, reread that. Before he had seen the Lord's Messiah. My mind did something weird there. Moved by the Spirit, he went into the temple courts when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him what the custom of the law required. Simeon took him in his arms and praised God, saying, Sovereign Lord, as you have promised, you may now dismiss your servant in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the sight of all nations, a light for revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel. The child's father and mother marveled at what was said about him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary, his mother, This child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too. I'm going to stop there. So, not only was Jesus being born fulfilling a prophecy, then there was yet another prophecy that was given by Simeon right after the purification rites were done. So, um,
Well, and then even with, as it says, um, in there that Simeon would not pass until he saw.
yeah,
So we're fulfilling a prophecy and getting a prophecy.
yeah. And I mean, it says blessed them, but you're blessing them, but you're also basically saying, hey, he is destined for these things.
Mm-hmm.
This is what he will do. And in fact, as we move forward into this gospel message, we're going to next go into Jesus's works
Mm-hmm.
um, as he was growing up. Um, so we very much appreciate you guys sticking along with us.
Absolutely.
We'll pick back up next time for episode 5. And we're just going to move forward with Jesus, just moving forward in his life.
Absolutely.
So thanks for sticking around. We hope you guys have safe travels if you're driving, if you're at home. Thanks for hanging around with us. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that just a little bit, if you are watching on YouTube and you see some things changing here, um, that is due to the blessing of the Lord.
Yeah.
So with the setup changing, eventually we plan to have some intro music for this podcast, as well as um, some different recording software, and going on from there. And because the Lord is working through us, we can do these things and share the gospel with you. So, like Matt had said, we thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your time. And
Yeah. Enjoy your week. Have
yep,
a good week.